The Borderlands franchise is dead-ass tired. Developed by Gearbox Software, a development studio mostly renowned for the Borderlands franchise, but was also known for the Brothers in Arms series, the Halo Combat Evolved PC port, releasing the shit shows that were Duke Nukem Forever and Aliens Colonial Marines, and is very much associated with longtime studio head Randy Pitchford, who is notoriously an immensely weird man. Borderlands was once the gold standard for first-person shooters with role-playing game mechanics. But by 2025, the franchise had long overstayed its welcome, kind of like a 2-hour-long Midwest goodbye. Sure, Gearbox Software struck upon a winning formula with 2009's Borderlands, i.e. the first game in the series, which introduced a humorous roster of characters, as well as this motherfucker, and overall established that aforementioned winning formula with class-based action that was playable solo or up to 4 players cooperatively, with a leveling system featuring skill points that modify your class's damage output, specific special abilities and such, and a randomized loot system for a ludicrously large amount of randomly generated weapons, shields, and etc. that all have their own unique effects, styles, and rarities. And sure, the sequel in 2012's Borderlands 2 polished up the rough edges present in the first game, all while featuring a surprisingly engaging narrative to where Borderlands 2 easily remains the best Borderlands game and was considered a Game of the Year contender back when it launched in 2012 because it was an awesome game, but unfortunately the franchise fell off after that. 2014's Borderlands the pre-sequel was widely considered a step back, 2022's fantasy-themed spin-off in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was a fun diversion but still not comparable to a proper Borderlands experience, and 2019's Borderlands 3 featured a terrible story with annoying antagonists, cringeworthy attempts at witty humor, a sense of disrespect towards the franchise's legacy characters, especially its female characters, and overall grating dialogue, especially from the one and only Claptrap, who is clearly named as such because he doesn't know how to shut his fucking trap.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
But anyway, the point. Borderlands 3 just lacked narrative momentum to the point that the gameplay loop alone, as fun as it could be, could not sustain a story that actively irritated me at every possible juncture. I just didn't care about Borderlands 3's stakes at all, opting to quit about 2/3 of the way through the game because the writing forced me to contemplate why I hate myself, as well as all of the bad choices I've made throughout my life. Choices like being an English major, or playing Borderlands 3. It just wasn't a good time. 2025's Borderlands 4 fared even worse for me, though not because Borderlands 4 is inferior in quality to Borderlands 3, because to be frank, on a comparative basis, Borderlands 4 is actually a better game than Borderlands 3, but rather it's more due to release and timing. See, in 2019, the Borderlands franchise hadn't yet overstayed its welcome, meaning that, upon its announcement, I was pretty hyped for Borderlands 3. But in 2025, that same type of palpable excitement just wasn't present for Borderlands 4. I mean, come on, the gameplay trailers alone presented the title as just being yet another Borderlands game, albeit with a bit more polish, more types of randomized loot like weapons, shields, and such, some new classes, including a new take on the Siren class, who in this game is a gothic witch, you can guess who I played as, and an actual open world rather than the prior franchisal staple of gameplay zones. But unfortunately, overall, with all of the quality of life improvements shoved aside to where they actually belong, Borderlands 4 contained a gameplay loop that remained consistent with the established tried and true Borderlands formula. And for the record, I'm saying that as a pejorative. If anything, there just weren't really any transformative changes to the standard Borderlands experience here. And considering that the Borderlands franchise's core gameplay functionality had more or less remained very similar since the first Borderlands title, which once again released back in 2009, That's a big problem. Because that gameplay formula that once felt very Subway fresh had now become dated. Because in 2025, I felt fatigued with this series, and judging by Borderlands 4's sales performance compared to that of Borderlands 3, I don't believe that I'm the only one that feels this way. Meaning that the best option for Borderlands 4 would have been like a soft reboot or something of the ilk. Granted, I don't know what a soft reboot for the Borderlands franchise would even look like, but then again, I'm not a game developer, so that's not really my job. My job is just to be a pain in the ass, criticizing everyone from the comfort of my armchair, which as we all know is the hardest job one can do. But still, I know enough that Gearbox's approach to Borderlands 4 was flawed. If anything, Gearbox Software should have approached Borderlands 4 by revamping the entire status quo of Borderlands gameplay uniquities, complete with some new ideas and gameplay functionality. But with Borderlands 4, Gearbox instead chose to embark on the tried and true gameplay route, which unfortunately, in my opinion, was a mistake. Even when considering that the core, more visceral elements of the gameplay within Borderlands 4 remain solid. Because oddly enough, Borderlands 4's moment-to-moment gameplay by itself can still be fun. For a few examples, the combat alone is quite enjoyable between all the different sorts of movements and actions like sprinting, grappling, gliding, unleashing your class's special abilities, switching between weapons, switching between some weapons' alternate fire modes, mixing and matching weapons with different elemental status effects, and just becoming lost in the bloody comic booky action just for the sake of it. Hey, don't judge me, I'm only a sadist in video games. Because divorced from everything else, the actual first-person shooter aspect of Borderlands 4 is fluid and crisp. And then there's just how the loot aspect of this looter-shooter remains solid as well. Because there is a certain satisfaction when opening a chest that reveals weapons with high rarity. It's just another strength of the game and the franchise's overall formula that still works in 2025. So with the looting and the shooting actually being enjoyable, what's the problem with Borderlands 4? Well, kind of everything else. Set on the once hidden planet of Kairos, our Vault Hunter of choice allies with the planet's locality to more or less rebel against the Order, i.e. the force that oppresses Kairos' citizenry and is led by the Timekeeper, who is the planet's dictator. Which solidarity with planet Kairos on that one. And that's kind of it as far as narrative goes, which on the surface isn't necessarily a problem, given how the Borderlands franchise isn't really known for its depthful storytelling, but it unfortunately becomes a problem in terms of overall execution of concept. After all, Borderlands 2 encouraged the player to care about its wacky world, action, and characters via the game's narrative, as well as watching Tiny Tina commit hilarious crimes against humanity. But Borderlands 4 doesn't really do the same. While sure, Borderlands 4's story and writing quality is a marked improvement over Borderlands 3's god-awful plot and presentation, but you have to be the white community's worst jumper in order to be incapable of clearing that low bar. In other words, Borderlands 3's narrative proceedings were simultaneously infuriating and irritating, which is a very volatile combination, whereas Borderlands 4's writing is comparatively dull. For one thing, the jokes and humor fall flat and lack the witty creativity present from Borderlands 2, the franchise's standard bearer, meaning that Borderlands 4's narrative stakes themselves, at best, only really achieve mediocrity. Like, I played Borderlands 4 for 28 hours before I ultimately quit the game because I just didn't really care about the story or making the world of Kairos a better place. Tonally speaking, Borderlands 4 attempts to straddle the line between light humor and high stakes, but achieves neither by meeting in the middle, reflecting why centrism will always be doomed to fail. The comedy is lackluster, with predictable punchlines that undermine any form of narrative sincerity and character development, all while also lacking a sense of wit and charm that can elevate such childish nonsense. The writing inspires eye rolls more than chuckles, and that's all even before we approach the problem that is Borderlands 4's main antagonist, i.e. the Timekeeper, who was barely present during my 28 hours of game time. Instead, I heard a lot from Idolator Sol, one of the Timekeeper's generals, who is just a complete bore. All he really really does is grumble grievances towards the player with no stylistic panache, aside from, wow, this guy really sucks, and not even in a fun way. He's just a one-dimensional grumpus. And that's an issue considering that, with the absence of the Timekeeper, he was essentially the antagonal stand-in, and was so for roughly the majority of the 28 hours I spent playing Borderlands 4. He just created another wedge between myself and the story. Furthermore, the Timekeeper's absence in the narrative compares poorly to Borderlands 2, considering that game immediately introduced us to its antagonist, Handsome Jack, who was the award-winning combination of charming and psychotic, a fiend that was lauded as being one of the best gaming villains of that era because he was simultaneously detestable but also kinda hilarious. All I'm saying is this man had presence, which is something that the Timekeeper comparatively didn't really achieve during my 28-ish hours of playtime. He's just a void of nothing. And while the Timekeeper being a void of nothing is better than Borderlands 3's irritating villains, because you know, influencers are awful in both video games and real life, especially real life. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That just doesn't change how Borderlands 4's story is missing the agency of a more proactive and present big bad. It's a problem. Borderlands 4's open world nature unfortunately widens this rift of I don't give a fuck even further. Because yes, the playable zone format has more or less been relegated to the franchise's past, whereas the vast majority of Borderlands 4 is open world with minimal zones. But in year 2025, Borderlands being open world just isn't as exciting as it would have been many years ago. After all, many AAA games, too many AAA games, are either live services or open world titles, even when they really shouldn't be. Unrelated picture of Halo Infinite. In fact, these latter open world games are often criticized for being bloated with shopping list style content that often isn't as memorable as what is contained in a tighter gameplay experience, whether that be linear or non-linear games. And Borderlands 4 just doesn't feature enough deviations from the typical open world format. Sure, there are specific main quests and side quests, but the character development and writing is often subpar, as explained in the prior section about the writing and storytelling, and the quest structure is the same that it's always been since the first Borderlands released in 2009. Basically just kill enemies as they respawn out of buildings or porta potties, kill a specific amount of enemies, collect objects, maybe fight a boss, listen to a character drone on and on over the comms, and of course enduring Claptrap's bullshit. It's just the same old Borderlands shit with an admittedly fresher coat of paint, all alongside the overdone busywork that is ubiquitous with the modern open world genre. Things like collecting specific items, clearing out waves of enemies, collecting bounties, capturing areas for bases and such. And while I do enjoy some open world games that feature this type of content, like in the Horizon series or in something like the Insomniac Spider-Man games, you know, because fighting robot monster animals with a bow and arrow in Horizon rules, and playing as Spider-Man is cool because you get to play as fucking Spider-Man, Borderlands 4's open world isn't distinct enough because it plays like pretty much any other Borderlands game, but with an open world, meaning that Borderlands 4 just doesn't really feature enough meaningful gameplay content to justify Gearbox's design decisions. And when combined with how there aren't that many fast travel points, a bug where a certain style of open world activity can't be completed, glitches like falling through the map, and refusing to give the player a vehicle in the opening area of the game, even though there is a lot of terrain to cover on foot in that said open area, Borderlands 4's open world just doesn't really entice the player to return to the game all that much. Hence why I dropped the game after 28 hours of game time. Because while Borderlands 4's moment-to-moment gameplay and FPS combat is fun, and playing with friends will always have some merit, the overall sum of Borderlands 4's parts is fairly mediocre. And 28 hours of game time that averages to being, well, average, isn't a strong enough reason for me to continue my vault hunting escapades. Borderlands. There was just no justifiable reason for me to slog through another 30 plus hours of Borderlands 4 when there are too many potentially good games for me to play that I haven't experienced yet. Because truthfully, Borderlands 4 just isn't enough. And if there is a Borderlands 5, I really hope Gearbox heavily rethinks their design approach. Because at the current moment, the Borderlands IP is fucking exhausted.